This episode of the Astro Powder Powdcast is brought to you by Gema. Gema's newest Optiflex Pro model, the CF unit, offers simple, reliable color change in 20 seconds. The Optiflex Pro CF unit is the perfect solution for lab use, powder quality testing, and coating of small quantities or small size samples. For more information, call 877-437-6771. Once again, that's 877-437-6771. And be sure to mention, Ask Joe sent me. When you want to know that everything is covered, complete it with Gema.
The views and opinions expressed by the Astro Powder Podcast may not necessarily reflect those of the ChemQuest Group.
Hello, all you powder coating fans, and welcome to episode 34 of the Ask Joe Powder Powdcast. I'm your host, Joe Powder, a.k.a. Kevin Biller, and with me, as always, is my esteemed colleague, sidekick, and now a proud owner of a gorgeous golden-blazed green metallic Kawasaki Ninja ZX14. Nathan. He's the formulator dude for ChemQuest powder coating research.
Gotta go fast. We're broadcasting from the CQ PCR studios in Columbus, Ohio. The purpose of the Astro Powder Podcast is to bring the latest news and technical know-how to the global powder coating community. So let's get it rolling.
Okay, but before we do,
Shout out.
I'd like to give a shout out to Gary Goro. You might wonder who Gary Goro is, but Gary was my introduction to the powder coating world. Way back in 1978, I was hired by the Glidden Paint Company, and he was my first supervisor and mentor. And as a matter of fact, I think I was the first person to report to him. He was fairly new in the group as well. Everybody that knew Gary recognizes him as a very intelligent, witty, meticulous, and hardworking individual. I learned my fundamentals of formulating from him, including process technology and really interestingly, how to communicate in a corporate setting. Something that they don't teach you too well, I think, in school. I started my career out as a lab technician. However, Gary gave me responsibilities beyond my job description, and it really allowed me to grow and blossom as a formulator and contributor to the powder coating industry. Within a few years, Gary left the Glidden Research Center, and he embarked on a stellar career of well over 30 years in PPG's powder coating development group located in Strongsville, Ohio. He's retired now, but we still keep in touch. So hats off to you, Gary. Thanks for helping me get my start in powder coatings, and wish you the best. Okay, friends, it's time now for news in our Guess What segment.
Guess what?
All right, here's one from Coatings World. BIC introduced a new post-add additive for matting powder coatings. BIC, or BUC if you're in Europe, or BYK if you just like reading letters. But it's just a new material they've come out with to adjust gloss, and it's a post-add, which is interesting. It's not extruded into the formula. It's actually added to the powder afterwards, and you can adjust the gloss with that. It seems like the sort of thing that would be useful for adjusting production batches, or even for end users that are trying to make adjustments to the powder that they're spraying.
It's interesting, Nate. They mentioned in their press release that typically powder coating gloss reduction is implemented by using incompatibility of binders. And they go on further to say special hardeners are used, but however, some of these hardeners are subject to labeling, which Really? I don't think that's an issue here in North America, but apparently there are things in Europe. And we're not talking about TGIC. I think there must be something new on the list.
That's an interesting concern because, yeah, we do know that this particular material it's inert. It's just a dry powder that doesn't have any sort of toxicity issues.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys are actually going to be showing it off at the Powder Coating Summit here in a couple of weeks. So anybody attending the lab demo there will have a chance to see how it looks.
Yeah, it's good stuff. We've looked at it in our laboratory, and it's, definitely delivers the goods on gloss reduction.
Yeah, and they're not even paying us to say that. All right, here's another item. Tiger Drylac launches 6 new super durable polyester colors.
Yeah, and we're not going to talk about that because that's really not news.
I know.
It's been a slow news week.
You know, sometimes we look at the press releases and the news for the week, and sometimes it's just colors and super durable polyesters.
And, I think it's the August syndrome in Europe. I think everybody's
Everyone's on vacation.
Everybody's on holiday, and they had to put something out there.
All right, well, from the Europeans, the European Coatings Journal reports double-layer powder coating to enhance corrosion protection. This is a study that was published in Progress in Organic Coatings, volume 158 for September 2021. They're talking about a novel epoxy resin modified PVC powder coating, which is used as a primer, and pure PVC powder coating as a top coat, which can be applied for the corrosion protection of steel in marine environments by electrostatic spraying. So I guess what they're talking about here is a thermoplastic system. It's a 2-coat, epoxy on the bottom, PVC on the top, or it's a combination of epoxy and PVC. But you talk about a corrosion protection in a marine environment, that's kind of the real extreme end of the spectrum when we talk about corrosion protection.
Yeah, and if you look at this, Nate, this work was done in Qingdao, China, and it was a collaboration between their College of Chemical Engineering and also it looks like a government laboratory of marine environmental corrosion and biofouling, part of their Institute of Oceanology. What it looks like they're doing here is they are doing a blend of a thermoset epoxy with PVC as their primer. And what that does is it's going to give them good adhesion because of the epoxy component, but it's going to give good intercoat adhesion because it's going to have some PVC available for the pure PVC top coat. So it's an interesting twist. It's not super duper science, but it is it's a clever formulating trick, I would say.
Awesome.
Okay, my friends, it's now time for the question and answer portion of our podcast.
Do you have a question?
Ask Joe Powder.
Well, you can ask him.
Ask Joe Powder.
He has the answer that'll advance your
Powder coating.
It's the Ask Joe Powder Powdcast.
All right, this question comes from Larry Griswold in Kennesaw, Georgia. He says, Dear Joe, I've been a formulator in the powder coating industry for over 25 years. When I started in the 1990s, there was so much fanfare about UV curable powder coatings. It seemed at the time this technology was the wave of the future. What happened to it? Is anyone using UV curable powder coatings? Your perspective will be greatly appreciated.
Hey, Larry, thanks for your question, and yeah, hope things are going well in Georgia. Been a while since we've talked. Yeah, I think, Nate, this is a question where a lot of stuff to talk about. I think what I'd like to do is, kind of give you a description of, what we mean by UV curable powder for our audience, because it may be a kind of a foreign topic or technology to some of our listeners, and kind of just break it down so people understand that. Then maybe we can talk about what the advantages are, can kind of add some of the places where it has been used commercially, and maybe not anymore in some cases.
And just a shout out to episode 5. That's an interview that we did with one of the guys over there at Keelan Polymers They're a UV Cure powder maker and applicator out of the Cleveland area.
Yeah. They're one of the pioneers. Keyland Polymer and DVUV, their sister company. They were one of the first ones in the 1990s to embrace UV curable powder coatings for heat-sensitive substrates.
Well, and they're showing no signs of slowing down either, which that's what's interesting is, why hasn't everyone else caught on to the UV Cure powder?
Yeah, and just to kind of break it down for our audience, UV curable powder coatings, basically, it's solid powder coating type material, like you would expect, in its delivered form. But the formulation and chemistry is basically resins and curing materials in the binder that most commonly they're free radical cure, and that free radical chemistry is driven by photoinitiators, which are liberated, or not liberated, but they're excited by intense UV light. Basically, the advantage here is, as opposed to a thermoset low temperature cure powder coating where you run the risk of the stuff pre-reacting maybe during the extrusion process or perhaps in transport or storage, with UV cure, nothing reacts unless there's the UV light.
Well, yeah, and that's the cool thing about UV Cure powder is that it's separating the melt flow stage from the curing stage. So, yeah, you said with the thermoset, you put your dry powder onto a part, and then you have to heat it and hold it at a temperature for a period of time. It could be a couple minutes, could be an hour if it's a really heavy part. With UV Cure, you just want to flow the material, and you can do that any way that you want. It could be convection, it could be infrared, it could be a heat gun mounted to a robot. But as long as you flow out the powder and then you hit it with the right wavelengths of UV energy to match with the photoinitiators, and it cross-links like almost instantaneously.
Yeah, and you mentioned thermoset powder coatings. During the melt flow phase, and this is something that has to be managed and is difficult to manage, with low temperature cure thermosets, they're starting to react during that melt flow phase. It's hard to kind of disengage that with the film formation or the flow out properties. With UV cure, you can flow it. And like you said, no reaction, no viscosity buildup or anything like that. So, it gives you the opportunity to process the coating, and obviously the substrate or the parts at extremely low temperatures. And I don't know, you've done a lot of formulating in this field, Nate. Kind of temperature range would you say is, kind of common for a UV curable powder?
Well, and then, again, it depends on what type of heating you're using. If it's infrared, it could be very high temperature, but you're only touching the outside of the part. Especially on flat parts, you might heat up the coating, but the part underneath is going to be untouched by it. So we're talking about the powder melts, around 100 C, maybe even lower, which in a thermoset system is, typically a low cure thermostat. It's going to be at least 125, 130.
Yeah. So, the advantage of UV curable powder, and this kind of gets us into, where and why there would be applications that would be conducive to consider this type of technology. Low temperature heat sensitive substrates, and going to qualify that with plastics, for instance. You've got what temperature does the plastic distort or deform, and that's measured in the laboratory as a heat deflection temperature, HDT, and it depends on the polymer, depends on the molecular weight of the polymer, but this, by using or contemplating using UV curable powders, You can look at substrates that, have heat stability, as low as 110 or 120 C. So certainly opens up the world.
Or even lower, because really we're talking about, different types of plastics, but also composites, wood composites. One of the most common commercial applications for UV cure powder is MDF, medium density fiberboard, which is, it's a wood powder. It's held together with some sort of a binder.
Yeah, I think you can call it an engineered board, I guess. Some people refer it to it.
But there are some cases where people have UV cured just wood.
Mm-hmm.
You think
yeah,
about
natural wood.
Natural wood, 100 Cs when the water starts coming out, and that's when you start to have problems.
Yeah. And then, talking about the plastics, we've done a fair amount of work in our laboratory with injection molded plastics, which, think of some of them that are pretty common, like polycarbonate, alloys of polycarbonate, and ABS. We've actually looked at some of the polyolefins, which make things a little tough with, adhesion sometimes.
Nothing sticks to them.
Yeah. But, now, the other thing I mentioned about UV cure powder, and this is true of any powder that you want to apply to a non-conductive substrate, like, plastics, for instance. What we recommend and what we've seen success with is applying a conductive solution, not a conductive paint or primer, but a simple conductive solution to the surface of the plastic. You can have a compliant solvent used to make the solution, and then apply the powder electrostatically and get good film build. And then introduce it into the heating process, which is going to cause the film formation. So.
We'll come back to this question after these messages. Gema powder coating systems offer you greater efficiencies while producing high-quality results. We provide the very best in powder delivery, application technology, and connectivity for smarter factory automation. With Gema, you get maximum performance and repeatability whether you are on the shop floor or away from it. For a demonstration, call 877-437-6771. Once again, that's 877-437-6771. And be sure to mention, Ask Joe sent me. When you want to know that everything is covered, complete it with Gema.
The Powder Coating Research Group is a proud sponsor of the Ask Joe Powder Podcast. PCR is the only independent laboratory dedicated to powder coating technology. We do everything from raw material evaluation, formulating the next generation of coatings, new product development, testing, troubleshooting, training, and consulting. To find out more, visit our website at powdercoatingresearch.com, or you can email Kevin Biller at kevinbiller@yahoo.com. Thanks for listening to the Ask Joe Powder Podcast.
Okay, fans, we're back. And, if we want to talk about what types of chemistries are available, and, as formulators, there are a few chemistries out there. It's not anywhere near as extensive as what is available for thermosetting, but that may change with time. But methacrylated polyesters are available of different kinds of viscosities and melt points that we can use. There's also some methacrylated epoxies for maybe more indoor applications.
Right. There's, generically speaking, there are polyesters, there are epoxies, there's some more urethane type.
Mm-hmm. Urethane oligomers.
Oligomeric materials. So, yeah, you can get kind of the range of interior, exterior durability that you do with thermosets. Just a lot fewer options, a lot less flexibility in terms of the materials that are available.
Yeah, and we talk about our formulators toolkit, and I liken it to with thermoset powder coatings. You got like a Formula One kit kind of array of or collection of tools. Multiple drawers of all kinds of tools of all shapes and sizes. And with the formulators toolkit for a UV curable powder, you got one of those little handyman's toolkits that they come in when they have to do work on your plumbing. They've got a pair of pliers and a pipe wrench and maybe a couple screwdrivers. So, and like I said, that may change with time because we're actually seeing a renewed interest in this, and people are starting to ask questions like, "Hey, could UV curable powders fit into our next generation of coating technology?" And if you look back at what happened, Larry, you had mentioned, they seem to be a big thing in the 1990s, and indeed, it was a big deal. People were really pushing them and saying it's going to really change the industry. The first commercial applications for UV curable powder coatings, I believe the first one was fully assembled electric motors. Mm-hmm. The company was Baldor. Their plant it actually was in eastern Oklahoma, not far from their headquarters in Fort Smith, Arkansas. They converted over a lacquer spray paint line to a UV curable powder coating. And one of the things that was pretty remarkable was the footprint of their finishing operation was extremely small. It would fit in this recording studio, Nate, which if you guys ever come by in Columbus, we'll show you our recording studio. And basically with those electric motors, they traverse the finishing line on a spindle on a chain and edge conveyor. The powder was applied with two fixed guns as the motors rotated in front of the guns, and then it was then transitioned into infrared, which melted the coating, just like you had remarked, Nate. And then soon thereafter, while the coating was still quite warm, was exposed to UV. And the process was done, the coating was finished. And
that's interesting how that doesn't really seem to be part of the conversation anymore, that you could do assembled parts with all the solder and the adhesives and the sealants inside of it, and you can coat the outside, you can UV cure it, and you don't expose the inside to those high temperatures. So it's interesting that's not really been part of the discussion. We had one project a long time ago. They were interested in coating, hydraulic parts for aircraft, and
that's true. Yeah,
it's like you can't just take this whole assembled part with all its fluids and gaskets and all that sort of stuff and stick it in an oven for 45 minutes.
Yep. People have talked about using it for shock absorbers, assembled shock absorbers. Actually, in those 1990s, a company making automotive radiators switched over to UV curable powder coatings. Mm-hmm. And these were fully assembled automotive radiators. And the key here was, most of the substrate was metallic. There's, the fins and the tubes and everything. But the key here was they wanted to use powder coating, but they couldn't use a conventional thermoset because the solder used to assemble the radiator, the core of the radiator, the solder would start to melt if it was a traditional powder coating thermoset cure temperature. They did that for a number of years. I don't think they're doing it anymore. There was another application, and this one was in France. I'm trying to think of the name of the company, but basically it was vinyl flooring, and it was on a continuous roll off, web or line of vinyl, and the powder was applied and it was melted and cured. Perfectly flat substrate, which made it easy, not any corners or cavities for the UV light to penetrate. So that was one of the successes. We had a project way back then where we were doing hardboard This was for whiteboards for schools and for offices. But we did a trial. We coated at least 100 of these things one day, and it was UV curable white powder applied as these sheets were going by on a flat line, and then some infrared, and right after the infrared there were a bank of UV lamps. These were the old Fusion UV lamps, which is part of Arrayus now, but it worked fine. Just was one of those things where we always talk about this. Companies may see a new technology as meeting their needs, not only the performance, but also the economic requirements, but they get cold feet. It's the old first adopter syndrome where they don't want to be the pioneer and have to figure out all the things that might go wrong that were unforeseen.
And I guess while you're talking about kind of the, what are the disadvantages, I'd say, for flat parts going by on a flat line, you have a really good, line of sight to every part that
Correct.
You're coating. For really complicated 3D parts, that might be difficult to do with UV.
Yeah, for sure. And, just by its nature, UV curable coatings, and, there's certainly UV curable powders fall under this. Clear coats are a lot easier to get full cure with the ultraviolet light as opposed to certain colors. When you got a pigment, the pigment's either could reflect, diffuse, or absorb the UV, depending on the color and the UV wavelength. So it's a little bit more of a challenge for the formulator, but we've done clear coats, we've done whites, we've done black.
Metallics.
We've done metallics, yeah, we've done absolutely. And we've done them on all sorts of substrates. And, we are a research lab, product development research lab, so we look at things like this, and we recognize the potential for this type of technology. Just a matter of getting it out there and getting first adopters to do some adopting, I think. The thing I guess we should talk about a little bit is, what is the future of UV curable powder coatings? And this is one that I think I've learned through the years. You've got to be careful with the concept of if we build it, they will come, which would be a technology push rather than a market pull. I think people need to identify potential markets, and those people that are in those markets have to understand and be convinced of the potential, but it's got to be something realistic, and then we can put the technology together and meet their needs, and that from that perspective, as opposed to building something and saying, hey, you guys, do you want to buy this?
Yeah, and that's, as technology guys, we look at something like this and we say, hey, that's really cool, and you should use this everywhere, but really it's the reality of the world is that.
Yeah, and that being said, our good friends at DVUV and their sister company, Keelan Polymer, they made a commitment, and they formulate and manufacture UV curable powder coatings, and they have an application line, actually a sister company, DVUV, and they're quite busy with their powder coating MDF for a variety of different end uses. And you can talk to those folks to learn more about it. But they've proven that it's commercially viable and economic, and it does answer some needs for those specific end uses. I think people should take a new look at UV curable powder coatings and see if they fit into their future. Okay, everyone. Before we go, let's fill you in on some upcoming events.
Hey, friends, where are we going?
To an upcoming event.
All right, we'll just run through these. The live China Coat has been canceled. They should be doing a virtual component, so keep an eye out for that. Coatings, Trends, and Technologies is coming up September.
September 8th and 9th, and that's in Lombard, Illinois, which is outside of Chicago.
All right, and FabTech is the 13th through 16th of September in Rosemont, Illinois.
That's the same week as the European
All right, yeah, the European Coding Show decided not to do the in-person event again this year, so they are doing a virtual conference, though. There should be all kinds of talks there.
Yeah, they've got a great lineup. They've got a powder coating session where there's 6 papers being delivered.
Yeah, and say about that.
And don't forget, my friends, September 22nd and 23rd, right here in our fair city of Columbus, Ohio, we will be holding live the Powder Coating Summit at the Hilton Polaris. For details, you can find that at powdersummit.com.
The 27th through 29th of September, the Middle East Coding Show is happening at the Dubai International Convention and Exhibition Center in Dubai, UAE.
Okay, before we go, you can catch the Ask Joe Powder Q&A in print in Powder Coated Tough magazine, the flagship of the Powder Coating Institute. You can also find it in PPCJ, Polymers Paint and Color Journal, with our good friends in the UK. And you can find it on the respective websites as well as Paint and Coatings Industry magazine under their Finishing Flash tab.
You can find us online at AskJoePowder.com. If you want to be the first to know when a new episode comes out, subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We have a YouTube channel. We're in the process of actually putting all of our episodes up there. So if you prefer to listen to podcasts on YouTube, you'll be able to do that. Please subscribe to the channel. There's a Twitter account, aka Joe Powder. And if you want to submit a question, the email address is askjoepowder@yahoo.com, or you can call and leave a message at country code 1-478-2-ASK-JOE. It's 1-478-227-5563. This has been a production of ChemQuest Powder Coating Research. Our original music, editing, and sound effects are done by Nick Page. Live through the ditches, laugh through the witches, love in the back of my Dragula.
And keep your powder dry, my friends.
Thank you for listening to the Ask Joe Powder Powdcast. This episode was brought to you by Gema. Gema's OptiStar all-in-one control unit leads the industry with a design fusing electrostatics and power feed in one compact device. By combining the powder injector and control unit functionality into one device, you get the highest coating efficiency, fastest response times of powder output, and excellent cleaning performance. For more information, call 877-437-6771. Once again, that's 877-437-6771. And be sure to mention, Ask Joe sent me. Configure it, feed it, optimize it, integrate it. Complete it with Gema.
Yeah. You've got to do the third solo from November Rain.
Okay.
I think that's a good one.
You guys are dating yourselves.
Or the second solo from LaGrange.
I'll consider it.
But yeah, that's why I always liked ZZ Top, because they always have two guitar solos.
Yeah.
They're the only band that's consistent like that.
Were they different guys doing them?
I don't know. I don't know anything about that band except
It was a bearded
cool
guy.
beards and
And the guy whose name was Frank Beard didn't have a beard. All right. We're We're wasting up valuable tape.
We're an audio podcast.
We're all going to get fired.